Bravery can be exemplified in many different ways by many different people. Throughout history, women have had to show bravery in many different ways. When thinking of women who have done this, Eleanor Roosevelt is a specific woman that comes to mind. Eleanor Roosevelt exemplified bravery throughout her life, and after doing research on Mrs. Roosevelt and all her endeavors, I feel that I have become more knowledgeable to start informing you about her. Being brave is standing up for what you believe in and doing what you think is right. Throughout her life, Eleanor Roosevelt has given outstanding examples on what it means to be brave and speaking your own thoughts and truths. Throughout her life, Eleanor has stood up for things she believes in, and firstladies.com 2020 tells us that Eleanor was born on October 11, 1884 in New York City. She suffered from a broken childhood due to her father's alcoholism and narcotic addiction, but these things began to change for her as she started to grow up and began to get involved in politics and further her marriage with her husband FDR. She was not content to stay in the background and handle domestic matters. She began to give press conferences and spoke out about human rights and for children's causes and women's issues, and she was also working on the behalf of the League of Women's Voters. Eleanor stood up against discrimination to help minorities. She prompted political engagement for women to take leadership roles and speak their voice. And according to biography.com 2020, she was the leader of the women's division of Democratic National Committee. This took a lot of bravery to do at this time because women were not really supposed to speak about their thoughts and their political standings. The National Women's History Museum 2020 talks about how when her husband was in office, how she had a lot to say. She lobbied her husband's appointment to more women in political positions, successfully securing Frances Perkin as one of the first women to be the head of the Department of Labor, along with many other women to follow. She also campaigned for racial justice, working to help black miners in West Virginia, advocating for the NAACP. Britannica.com 2020 explains how she launched an experimental community in Arthurdale, West Virginia, for the families of these unemployed miners. Although this was later regarded as a failure, she continued to advocate and expand for the roles of women in the workplace, rights of the African and Asian Americans, and also the rights of World War II refugees. History.com 2020 says Eleanor began to transform what people commonly thought and spoke of when it comes to first ladies. She transformed from a social hostess to an activist in her husband's administration. Eleanor was very brave and strong when it came to ordeals with her husband. Even after finding out that FDR had an affair and his later diagnosis of polio, she chose to stay with him and continued to help campaigning with his political career. After being diagnosed with polio, Eleanor continued to travel and lobby on behalf of her husband throughout the state to find out the needs of the public. After his death, she was a member of the Legislative Affairs Committee, where she began to do congressional work and record studies that voted on what needed to be said. Eleanor Roosevelt has had to be very brave throughout her life when it comes to facing adversity and standing up for what she believes in. Bravery can be exemplified in many different ways by many different people, and throughout history, women have had to show bravery in many different ways. When thinking about a specific woman, and after learning all about her, Eleanor Roosevelt definitely comes to mind. How do you think somebody shows bravery?